All right, a very, very good morning to everybody present here. I landed in the amazing city of Delhi about an hour and a half ago. I didn't know if the Gurgaon traffic would cooperate, but touch wood it has, and Andrew's very relieved that I made it on time. So to begin with, I'd first like to congratulate my colleague Siddharth and his team at CleverTap for picking up that amazing round of funding. So a loud round of applause once again for these guys. All right, so I'm Pradyut Hande. I spearhead product marketing at Netcore Solutions. And Netcore Solutions operates in the behavioral analytics and customer engagement space, a la what Siddharth was talking about his company. So the key agenda, or rather, yeah, this was number one. But yeah, so as he very rightly mentioned that we live in an environment that is proliferated by mobile apps today, right? And the agenda for today is not to simply let web and mobile businesses gain insights into what they can do to improve conversions, but also you need to understand what businesses are doing today or will be doing in order to impact you as users. So that's pretty much about what the agenda for today is. So Siddharth mentioned that you need to automate but not hyper-personalize. That does hold true for a lot of B2B businesses. And the key buzzword today is, of course, AI-powered personalization or behavior-driven personalization. And why businesses are doing this today is simply because your customers today want to, they want you to customize solutions or offerings or messages and communication tailor-made to their requirements. Gone are the days of mass marketing and traditional monolithic marketing where one size fits all. That's not the case anymore. And more businesses, whether they are web-driven or mobile app-based, are waking up to this reality and are figuring out that the only way to deliver value consistently and retain customers is to ensure that your communication is delivered in the most personalized, relevant, and timely manner possible. So a mere glimpse at this particular stat is going to tell you that the spends on MarTech, which is marketing technology or marketing automation technology in today's parlance, continues to grow in significance and magnitude. And this is precisely done for the reason that automation essentially ensures that manual intervention and involvement is reduced to the least amount possible, but not completely eliminated. That's something to be taken care of and kept in mind. But the entire idea of using MarTech or marketing automation is simply to ensure that your processes are streamlined, you're actually making use of every single valuable data source which is attributable to your customers at a very granular level. So when it comes to the first conversion catalyst that I wanted to talk about, we spoke about how personalization is what brands are moving towards today. This talks about dynamic website personalization, right? This is something that can be extended to mobile sites and mobile apps as well, and is capable of showing uplifts of upwards of 5 times. What I mean by that is, while your communication can be tailor-made at a very personalized level, it's also important to give your customers who land on your website or mobile app a very seamless, a very personalized navigational experience. Only when your customers or your users see content that is relevant and contextual to them are they likely to move further down the customer journey, right? Just think of the likes of a Netflix or an Amazon, where these are heavily recommendation engine driven. Now that's the kind of personalization that a lot of brands now need to bring in. Whether you are in the e-commerce industry, whether you are a travel app, whether you are a BFSI company, you can actually figure out what are the kind of products that your users are likely to browse and purchase, and accordingly tailor-make the entire viewing experience and navigational experience. So this is again to highlight the fact that personalization-driven marketing today is of paramount significance to brands across industries. Now, when I was speaking about dynamic website personalization, I spoke about how it's extremely critical to ensure that you leverage every single bit of customer level data that flows into your CRM, right? So at the base of this pyramid, you see something called a customer data platform, or you could even call it a 360-degree unified view of your customers. You know, what that simply means is you are essentially keeping record and you are creating an enriched profile of individual customers based on their historical behavior. You know, what are the kind of products that they're viewing? What are the kind of products that they're adding to cart? What is the kind of content that they're consuming? What are their interactions with your marketing communication? When is the best time to engage with them? In the sense that when do they open your emails? When are they most likely to respond to your SMSs or your push notifications on mobile apps? So at the back end, you are essentially creating an extremely enriched view of every single individual customer based on their demographic, geographic, and behavioral data points. And this becomes the foundation for creating personalized experiences across web and mobile app channels. And moving forward, if you can actually add a layer of machine learning to all of this, it brings in a degree of predictability to the kind of personalized experiences that you can craft and deliver. Now, machine learning has a lot to do with identifying hidden patterns in consumption trends, in navigation and purchase trends, and a whole lot of data points. We're going to see how that happens in the slide next. Now, I mentioned how dynamic website personalization can be done at multiple levels. Now, this is just to give you a flavor of how an e-commerce platform can go about personalizing the entire viewing, navigational, and eventually the purchase journey, right? So this is essentially an example of personalization for a first-time visitor. Now, once that visitor has landed on the website, has probably interacted with it, added his or her registration details, perhaps completed a purchase, that customer moves into another bucket completely, which means that the next time he or she lands on your website, he or she is exposed to a completely different viewing experience. This is personalization for a returning visitor. You can also carry out personalization based on past browsing or purchase behavior, where essentially you are showcasing or highlighting products that a repeat visitor has purchased or added to cart in the past. And mind you, these are examples just to give you a flavor of what can be done for an e-commerce platform. As I mentioned, this can be extended to multiple other industries as well. And finally, you can also carry out personalization based on the day, the season, the time zone, etc. But at the foundational level, it all comes down to the data that you're collecting at a very individual customer level. So I mentioned how machine learning can enter the picture in such a case, and using the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence, you can actually create a predictive model of the kind of products that a user may or may not add to cart and purchase. This is again based on his or her historical interactions with your website, with your app, with your marketing communication, based on data points such as the kind of products he or she has purchased, the mode of payment. So it goes into an algorithm which can actually accurately predict, to a large extent, the kind of products that he or she might purchase. And then these would be the kind of products that you would eventually expose your customer to. Any questions so far? Yeah.
Talking about customer data platforms,
right?
In your use case in your business.
Right.
Have you homegrown it, or have you used any third parties to quickly deliver the value for you? How do you go about
So we have our own platform, and so the foundation is of course something called a unified 360-degree view. A CDP is essentially a couple of levels higher, where you're essentially stitching even offline data into the entire platform. So we've got our own platform that we work with, and that becomes the foundation for the kind of personalization that you can drive. But there are other third-party vendors also which work in a plug-and-play manner as well. So those are the kind of solutions that a lot of mid-sized businesses would resort to in case they are not looking for a solution that merges engagement and retention also into the picture. If they're just trying to aggregate their data, if they're just trying to enrich their customer level data, then a third-party vendor would work better in that case.
Okay. And into the CDP, have you built some intelligence with AI and ML? Can you take a technical question? I don't know if it's very proprietary, the platform. Have you leveraged some proprietary technologies like Elastic, some technologies?
I'm unable to hear you. Could you speak up? Yeah.
Talking about the tool set, if I may ask you,
yes.
I don't know if it is.
Sure.
Have you leveraged some technologies like Elasticsearch or any other sort of things for building this proprietary platform, the CDP platform?
So the CDP essentially functions as your single source of truth, right? We have an AI engine that is built over this, which is essentially doing the predictive modeling. Right, so again, based on neural networks and a bunch of other AI/ML driven algorithms. So I can take that question in further detail, perhaps post this.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So that brings me to the next growth hack, which is essentially understanding why users are uninstalling your app. Right. Simple show of hands here. Which was the last app you guys uninstalled recently? Yeah.
So I uninstalled Cam Scanner, the app
Okay.
that we use for scanning documents.
Okay.
So reading to the security issues
Okay.
which the app causes, the data.
And how long did you use the app?
So it was forever, I guess, for maybe 4 or 5 years in my phone.
Okay.
So I've been using it for quite some time.
Okay. So it was primarily the privacy issues that
Yes.
caused you to uninstall the app.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else who wants to talk about? Yeah, sure.
So I have two news app on my phone, one the Quint and one the Daily Hunt. So I have installed one of them. Was
Okay.
not getting the relevant triggers from them to read, relevant content from them to read.
Okay. All right, so that makes a lot of sense, right? So we as users download apps, probably use them a few times, and once we realize that we're not really getting the kind of value that the app promised or the app was delivering at one point of time, we come to a stage where we either go dormant as users, where the app is just lying on your smartphone, or we end up uninstalling it because smartphone space is at a premium, right? Now, for a mobile marketer sitting at the back end, this is a very worrying sign, because at the end of the day, a mobile marketer or a marketer who is in charge of retention at any mobile app company, this becomes a key North Star metric that he or she is tracking at the end of the day, right? User churn and retention rates. So in a nutshell, it is every mobile marketer's eternal nightmare. The fact that he or she knows that it is impossible to retain 100% of an app user base. But it's also critical to note that your retention rates continue to fall, and this is an industry-wide trend. We'll see in the next slide, but you'll notice that across a 30, 60, and 90-day period, an app's retention rates continue to plummet. So it is an inevitability. It's something that you can't avoid, but at least, if you carry out an industry-wide trend analysis, you'll see that it's not restricted to one app category or industry alone. But for a mobile app marketer, it's not just enough to track these metrics, right? How does he or she improve his KPIs, right? It's important for a mobile marketer today or any app business to actually delve deeper and embrace the power of data instead of resorting to speculation. Right. So this is precisely where this comes into play, where a mobile marketer can now analyze the key events leading up to a particular uninstall. Right? Over a period of time, an app marketer can actually identify the top 4 or 5 factors, events, or reasons that were leading up to an uninstall. We're going to see how that works. So if you merely cast a glance at this particular graph, you'll notice that push notifications, which is an extremely tried, tested, and popular channel of engagement for mobile apps, the more in number or the more in frequency, it's likely to increase your uninstall rates, right? And I mentioned how it's important to identify the critical events leading up to an uninstall event. So that those events, once you've identified them, they become, or they can be categorized as vulnerable events. Now, examples of those could be for a coupon aggregator app, right? It could be a case where on entering the coupon code a couple of times or 3 times, it's not worked, or it's not, the platform isn't really accepting it. That could be a reason why your users drop off or might choose to uninstall. For a social media app, there could be a situation where a user has disliked abusive content 3 to 4 times. So this is just a sample basket of the kind of events that a mobile marketer would be tracking at the back end. Moving beyond this also, a marketer would also be looking at other factors such as the performance of the app, the kind of UI that was prevalent just before uninstall, also the historical patterns that a user would look at or function under on a particular app. So a bunch of factors eventually highlighting or putting a red light on the key events leading up to an uninstall. And the moment a marketer or an app business has identified these events, they can take remedial action, right? Was it an app crash multiple times that caused a user to uninstall? Was it poor UI or performance just before the user uninstalled? Was it because the user was unable to find the key feature or was unable to progress towards a conversion event? So a multiple basket of factors that once an app business identifies, they can actually correct. So for context, there was an example of a social media app where they witnessed the maximum number of uninstalls on day 0, which is essentially the day of app download and launch. And one reason that stood out glaringly after in-depth analysis was the fact that a lot of female users were receiving unrequited and a large number of male friend requests. And this was a key reason that went on to cause a lot of dissonance in the minds of the female users who ended up churning and uninstalling the app. So once we identified that this was one of the reasons, we essentially created a pathway, or we sort of highlighted the fact that female users could direct themselves towards the privacy settings and ensure that they weren't receiving those many mail requests all at once. And essentially it improved day 0 user retention rates by upwards of 35%. This is another example of a coupon aggregator where we witnessed a large number of uninstalls happening on day 0, which is the day of app download and app launch, where users were unable to find the coupon that they were looking for within 48 to 50 seconds. And this became a glaring issue for the app, which highlighted the fact that they actually needed to draw attention to the coupon finder feature, and they built that eventually into the app, and this ensured that their day 0 retention rates went up by a tad over 9%, which essentially brings me to hack number 3. But before I move to that, any questions from the audience? I'd be more than happy to take them. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So I think the entire examples that you showed
Yeah.
were for those customers who have already uninstalled the app.
Right.
Right. But when somebody has uninstalled the app, we have
Right.
already lost the touch point.
Right.
So shouldn't any kind of analysis or an ML technique should be based for arresting that attrition?
So actually, that's part of hack number 3.
Oh, okay.
But just to answer that,
Yeah.
once you have this data at the background, it helps you preempt churn, right? You are basically putting yourself in a position where you can arrest churn by predicting that this could happen. You have identified the key 4-5 events that could lead to churn,
Yeah.
and then you know that you need to work on these 4-5 to ensure that it doesn't happen again, right?
So, like in your
Yeah.
last example,
Sure.
like if somebody has uninstalled in a day 0, he's essentially a gamer,
Correct.
right? But
Correct.
definitely, if somebody who has been in your journey for past 2-3 months, I
Right.
think reasons can be attributed.
Yes,
for-
absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I highlighted was on day 0, but this can be done for week 1, week 2,
Exactly.
across 30, 60, and 90-day periods.
Yeah.
So in that case, the basket of factors would vary,
Yeah.
right? So this is just for day 0. As I mentioned, the factors can vary across the entire time duration. If he or she happens to be a loyal user and all of a sudden there's a drop off, and then the marketer realizes that he's not even launching the app for whatever reason, then the kind of data that is pulled in and analyzed would be different. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question. All right, so that brings me to hack number 3, where once a marketer has sort of identified the key events leading up to an uninstall, I mentioned how it's so important to arrest that churn. And one way to do that is through contextual app walkthroughs. Now, we've reached a stage in the entire mobile marketing story and evolutionary curve where we need to go beyond the traditional mobile marketing channels. So for the uninitiated and even the experts in the room, we rely so heavily on existing channels such as push notifications, in-app messages, SMS, and email, right? And this is primarily for customer engagement and retention, mind you. And these are obviously being done and need to be done at the most personalized, relevant, and timely level possible. But we have now come to a stage where perhaps it's important to elevate mobile marketing efforts to something else, something that will supplement these existing mobile marketing channels to give you the kind of marketing ROI and the kind of user retention and conversions that every mobile marketer dreams of. So what are contextual app walkthroughs? Right? So if push notifications are used to bring a user back to the app, in-app messages are triggered when an app user is active within the app, right? Now, if I had to break it down, think of contextual app walkthroughs as segmented, triggered, and highly contextual in-app messages that are shown to very specific users in real time. So these could be actually coach marks, these could be drop-down tips, and the purpose of these can be to elevate the onboarding process. These can be used to highlight key sticky features. These can also be used to create customized walkthroughs and eventually trigger messages that would nudge users towards conversion. So the next few examples should provide you greater clarity on that. So as I mentioned, if you have a look at this, you'll see that these are triggered in real time. You have a user who has launched the app, who is on a particular app page but does not know how to progress further. So contextual app walkthrough triggered right in the moment, once the marketer sees this in the backdrop, can actually push the user towards the next stage in the conversion funnel. You can also create contextual app walkthroughs based on the historical behavior of the particular user, such as the kind of content that he or she consumes. It could be a news app, it could be a video app, it could even be a music streaming app. Now, this example actually highlights what Zomato does very brilliantly, especially when they upgrade their user interface or they have added a new feature to their entire UI, where essentially they are drawing attention to what a user can get value out of on the entire mobile app. So instead of just allowing the user to explore the app, they want to shorten the path toward conversion, which is essentially like booking an order and placing an order and getting it delivered. One way to do that is to highlight very, very carefully what each individual feature does. This can be used initially during the app onboarding process, and it can also be used when a new feature is launched, right? You have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I might be
Sure.
wrong, and maybe you can give me more perspective on this.
Sure.
But a lot of such experiences in general
Right.
on app can get very intrusive or
Right.
bad user experience in general, because
Correct.
you're interrupting the user a lot of times, especially
Agreed.
with people who have apps and who have been using these apps
Right.
for a long time. So how do you deal with that? Like, how do you balance the two?
Yeah, that's a valid point. So that is the case with a lot of what apps are doing today. The fact that they believe deep down inside that their entire target user base requires a bit of hand-holding, right? But with contextual app walkthroughs, you know exactly. So this is again data-driven. You are identifying the navigational paths of users within the app. You have the kind of data at the back end to figure out who exactly are the users that require something along these lines. So it is not a mass blast approach, it is a targeted and extremely segmented approach. So it's not sent out to everybody, right? Any other questions from this side? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is actually on the previous slide.
Sure.
So you said that all these contextualized walkthroughs
Right.
are in a way personalized as well.
Correct.
So for a first-time user, how do you,
Right.
on what basis do you personalize an experience? I understand if a new feature is launched and then
Right.
you're personalizing based on the
Right.
past experience.
Right.
How do you personalize?
No, so this is not for a first-time user specifically. So for a first-time user, you would have more of a generic onboarding, right? It could be a walkthrough. It could be something that they nudge you towards completing registration or logging in through a social login or your email address. So the first-time onboarding is again a very generic thing. But mind you, during this onboarding process, the kind of information that you're inputting in the form of your email address, in the form of your phone number, now that is going to kickstart the process of them collecting data at the back end where they can personalize it for future use.
Yeah, but that's my profile information, not
Correct.
my behavioral
I'm saying
information.
you're going to do something else after that on the app as well, right?
Okay. No, so
Yeah.
my question was around the walkthroughs only. So
Right.
if you have, say, new features
Yeah.
launched,
Right.
so then you're saying that those walkthroughs are based on my past behavior. So could
Right.
you like maybe give me an example so that I understand
Okay,
better?
sure. So for a new feature or an underutilized feature, think of the Swiggy Pop feature. Swiggy Pop came in probably a year ago, and they soon realized that while it was on the the homepage of the app, it wasn't really attracting that much attention. Folks were doing their regular business on the app itself, and they realized that one way to get it done was to sort of draw attention to the feature. So if you would have paid attention, they actually sort of caused it to glow a little bit like in and out. So that was one way to draw attention to it. The other example that I showcased to you of Zomato was when they revamped the entire UI. They essentially created 3-4 different widgets at the end of the app where it was more like informing the new users that the UI has been upgraded and this is what some of the new features can do. Now this becomes an example of an entire target audience based sort of walkthrough, right? Think of there are news apps out there, and based on the kind of content that you consume, they can actually recommend content that you might like in the future, right? So you can actually create customized and contextualized walkthroughs within the app where you are nudging them to consume the kind of content based on their past viewing or reading behavior.
But those are recommendations, no, not walkthroughs. So I'm just trying.
Yeah,
to...
so a recommendation shows up directly on your app.
Mm-hmm.
So the app is not actually telling you to, sort of consume this.
Correct.
A walkthrough is slightly more, to put it mildly, in your face or rather it's ensuring that you have top of mind recall for that. So there are a lot of users who miss those recommendations completely and they still go and search. Right? This would actually put things in context and it's likely to nudge you towards another conversion event.
Okay.
So I can give you a few more examples after this as well.
Sure. Thank
Yeah?
you.
All right. So yeah, this is actually the example that I was talking about. This was for a news app where essentially you create a feature on the app where they would get recommended content through a one click. And so that brings me to hack number 4, which is, we spoke about how it's important to understand uninstalls. We spoke about how it's important to arrest churn. And we spoke about how push notifications continue to play a significant role in a mobile marketer's KRA and KPIs, right? But it's a tragedy, it is a reality, the fact that not 100% of your push notifications actually get delivered to smartphone users, right? We have seen over a period of time that only about 25 to 30% of these carefully crafted, personalized, timely push notifications that you share actually get delivered. And one major reason for this that we've noticed, especially on these Chinese manufactured Android-powered OEMs, the likes of Huawei, Vivo, Oppo, etc., is the fact that your push notifications are going through the delivery gateway, but they're not getting delivered to the end smartphone user's device, right? And that is primarily because of the fact that these Chinese OEMs, they sort of cut off supply and cut off delivery at the back end to protect bandwidth and battery of the smartphone user, right? But with something called push amplification, you can actually increase your delivery rates by almost 30 to 50%. Now, I'm sure as mobile marketers sitting in this room and to anybody whom I have this conversation with, this is pretty much the reaction because everyone's been grappling with this challenge for years now, right? And there has been no solution in sight. And that's where push amplification comes into the picture, where essentially if you look at this trifecta, where you have the your customer engagement platform at one end, you have the delivery gateway, which is FCM or GCM in the case of Android devices, or APNS in the case of iOS devices, and at the other end of the spectrum, you have the smartphone device of the user. Now, when you send out a campaign through your customer engagement and behavior analytics platform, you would have a large chunk of your messages that go through the gateway, and there are some that get delivered and there are some that don't. I mentioned the reasons why it doesn't happen for a lot of these Android devices, but with push amplification, you can essentially ensure that it makes the smartphone device makes an API call directly to the server and pulls the undelivered messages. Now, the API call is made essentially at an interval of about 60 minutes to ensure that all those undelivered messages are finally delivered. One question that I have very often is, what happens if a mobile marketer or an app is sending out multiple campaigns during the day? Is it likely that the user gets bombarded with 2-3 push notifications from the same app at the same time? But that's not the case. You can actually choose the interval in which these undelivered messages finally get delivered to the smartphone user. It could be 30 minutes, it could be 60 minutes, it could be 90 minutes, for that matter, right? I'm sure there are a lot of questions around this, so I'll take this once I finish this particular segment. So, in the case of a leading fashion, fashion app, we noticed that their CTRs and their delivery rates went up by almost 2x by using push amplification. And essentially, higher delivery rates mean higher user engagement and higher conversions. Simple logic dictates that the larger audience that you reach out to, the higher would be the chances of they opening that communication, in this case push notifications, and them landing on the particular app page that you're directing them to, and eventually carrying out a purchase or a content consumption, any conversion event. So the higher your delivery rates, the higher your user engagement and conversions. Any questions on this section? Yes, of course.
Thank you. Regarding the pull notification,
Just speak up a little bit. Yeah.
Regarding the pull notification,
Yeah.
Mostly when the app is not
Active. Right.
how do you manage to do it? I understand that there are other forms of delivery like inboxes where
Correct.
you can
App inboxing. Correct.
that's the maximum you can
Correct.
do. But push display as a notification, not is it possible? Suppose the app is not active at all.
Suppose the app is not.
The app is not active at all.
Right.
I'm a user and I haven't launched the app.
Right.
And that is when the push notification is usually useful.
So again, this all comes down to the opt-in, right? If a user has decided that he does not want to receive push notifications from the app, there is no way that you can reach them, right? So
Correct.
this feature would not work in that case. Think of push notifications as permission-based marketing, where the only way to reach out to your customers is based on the opt-in that they provide when they launch the app for the first time,
Okay.
right? It wouldn't work otherwise.
So you leave a background thread or something on the app which pulls the
Correct.
thing on the server.
Correct. And again, explicitly only when the users have opted in.
Correct.
Otherwise, it becomes another channel of spam.
Yeah, opted in, I understand. So
Right.
even then, what you suggest is make an pull request every 60 seconds from the background of the app.
Correct. Correct. And again, I'm sure you probably have this question as well. Does that take a toll on the smartphone user's battery? It doesn't. In all the tests that we have run, it takes about 0.5 to 1% of the your user's battery life. But again, it depends on the number of apps that the user is operating at that time.
At that
So,
time. And also you can decide on the app message delivery strategy, like if there are 3 messages you want to
Correct.
pick and choose what message
Yes,
that could
yes.
be delivered, or
You can do that. So at the back end, you are essentially seeing that you sent out a campaign at maybe 11 a.m. in the morning. Out of that, 25% got delivered to your Android users, about 70% got delivered to your iOS users. Now you realize that it is a very time-sensitive campaign. For example, it could be a 24-hour flash sale, right? So it's important for you to reach out to a large segment of your audience on your Android devices. So one way to do that is by enabling push amplification. You say that for all those undelivered ones, and for all those who have opted in, obviously, you can actually trigger that API call maybe 60 minutes after the campaign has gone out, to ensure that you give adequate time for the notifications to get delivered. Yeah.
thank you.
All right. Yes.
So if the app is not running in the background,
Right.
this won't work, right? Sorry.
If you'll have to repeat your question.
Yeah, if the app is not running in the background, so
Right.
it's totally killed, and then this messaging won't work. This marketing messaging, push notification won't work, correct? Because there's no thread running to pull the messages from the server.
Correct. In that case, it won't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I have another question. So
Yeah.
you're saying that this push notification will definitely improve the overall engagement, but sometimes if you deliver more and more push notification, it can cause churn as well. So at
Absolutely.
what point you have to stop and not do a lot of notifications?
Right. So there's something called frequency capping, where at the back end, while you are observing this customer behavior, this user behavior, you know that there is a segment of users that respond negatively. In fact, a large segment of users, because then it becomes a channel of spam communication. And that's not something that you want to do. Even if your notification campaigns are personalized, you're using their name, you're using their product recommendations, you're probably using their geolocation data, you ideally want to keep it to not more than 2 to 3 campaigns a day at the most. Because one thing is top of mind recall, another thing is brand dissonance. And you need to strike the right balance. And this balance would vary for app category to app category, right? So Netflix, for example, is not going to bombard you with notifications every time there is another episode added to a TV series that you've watched, right? So they know how to balance that. They'll probably send you an email saying that there is a new content piece added. instead of a push notification. So brands today are not relying on one channel alone. It has to be a multi-channel approach. While push notifications is a very tempting channel to reach out directly because it's appearing immediately on your smartphone user screen, you need to strike that right balance.
Okay, and just
Yeah.
one more question. So
Sure.
let's say you have a campaign running and
Yeah.
which sends 2 notifications to the user on a
Right.
daily basis, and
Right.
but users are not clicking on those notifications.
Right.
So do you think the strategy will change eventually, or this is not the right user, or maybe the messaging is not correct? So how do you think about that?
Right. So that is actually going to be the case for a lot of campaigns, because for an average push notification campaign would receive a CTR at most of about 10 to 12%, right? If it is like a brilliant campaign. So you need to, again, my point that I mentioned previously, think about it from a multi-channel approach. Now you can actually create customer journeys on marketing automation platforms where you can put in conditions saying that if such and such user segment has not opened the push notification within 5 minutes of me sending it or half an hour of me sending it, you can trigger another channel of communication. You can actually trigger maybe an SMS or an email. The idea is to collect as much data as possible to figure out what is the best channel to engage with a particular user. So over a period of time, you can actually figure out that maybe push notifications are not working for this particular user segment. My higher marketing ROI I'm getting through email or SMS or even WhatsApp for Business for that matter, right? And that's when you know that this is the preferred channel of the customer and that's the channel on which you would want to engage with them.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. All right, so that brings me to, yeah, sure.
Regarding the push notification campaigns,
Yes.
so usually what happens, and I'm not familiar with push notifications,
Sure.
I've not worked around them, so
Sure.
I don't know if it's the right question to ask. But usually what happens is that from all the apps, you get these notifications first thing in the morning.
Right.
So though from one particular app you're getting one notification, but you're getting like 10
Correct.
all at once.
Correct.
So usually what happens is that you don't end up seeing any of them.
Absolutely.
So like you said that, if a person does not open a notification in 5 minutes or say 10 minutes,
Right.
then send them person a mail. So
Right.
is there like an ideal time frame that you should wait for to send the communication through another channel for push notification? Because I might be working, say if I'm
Correct.
at work,
Correct.
I might see it like 5 hours later also
Correct.
and then act upon it.
Correct.
So is there an ideal time frame as to when you launch the campaign?
Yeah, so I'll take this question in 2 different variants. Number one, this will definitely happen. It's not restricted to push notifications alone. There will be probably during midday you'll get like a slew of emails from multiple brands, and the likelihood of you opening them and actually carrying out a particular action are extremely limited, right? Now, from an app's perspective, even though they think that you might open an app or rather respond to the push notification at a certain point of time, always keep in mind that they are collecting the kind of interactions that you're having across channels over a period of time, right? So if they see that, ma'am, your good name? Mansi. So if they see that Mansi, when I've sent her a push notification campaign, consistently at 10:30 a.m. over the last 2 weeks, she has probably responded or opened the app once or twice. They know for a fact that you are probably one of 2 things. You are not the right candidate or user base for push notifications, or 10:30 a.m. is not the right time for you to engage with. Now, they collect more data over a period of time. They realize that, hey, maybe when I send it at 12 or 12:30, when she has reached office and she's probably a little more free, she's responding to push notifications better. So then you fall into another bucket altogether. So they're optimizing for time, and they're also optimizing for channel. They realize maybe over a period of time that push notifications are not working at all, right? So then you become a candidate that moves into another bucket. Perhaps email or SMS is the right channel for them to engage on. So always remember that a mobile marketer is optimizing on 4 fronts, right? The idea is to get the 4 R's right. The right message to the right user at the right time and through the right channel. So these are the 4 parameters within which they are playing to ensure that they reach the right person. Yeah? All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings me to hack number 5. If artificial intelligence and machine learning is the global rage from a buzzword point of view, WhatsApp for Business has now emerged as a very powerful tool of customer engagement for brands that are probably in the SME category and also now enterprises. Now, WhatsApp in India and across the greater APAC region currently offers the WhatsApp Business API solution in 2 variants, right? They do not offer WhatsApp for Business as a promotional marketing channel, which means that you guys cannot send out marketing communication which you would normally do through emails, SMS, or push notifications for that matter. You can only use WhatsApp for Business for customer support in the form of perhaps chatbots and business notifications. Now, when I say business notifications, it refers to only transactional messages. So this is an example of what a custom chatbot would look like in the travel fraternity. 1 second. Right. So when you build a chatbot on WhatsApp, WhatsApp has a very strict mandate, which means that when a customer asks for certain maybe price-related or product-related information and the brand provides it, then it's not counted as promotional marketing, which means that the customer has actually asked for this information, so it does not fall under that paradigm. And in the case of a chatbot that you build on WhatsApp, WhatsApp has a strict mandate where they say that if a user is not receiving the kind of value or response to his or her queries within, say, 4 or 5 responses, then you cannot continue to use the chatbot, through NLP. You actually need to have manual intervention. They want to, protect the sanctity and the hygiene of WhatsApp as a platform. So they don't want the user to, fall off or drop off this entire platform experience. So that's one reason why WhatsApp has very clearly said that you need to have manual intervention or an agent at the back end to respond to queries when they're not responded to in the most satisfactory manner. And with regards to business notifications, you can actually send and use WhatsApp as an alternate channel today in comparison to SMS or any other channel for that matter, right? You can actually send ticket confirmations, you can send shipping details. If an order has been cancelled, you can actually send refund details. So a bunch of different transactional messages which WhatsApp allows brands to send within 10 very, very set templates that brands can now run, right? Yeah.
Yeah. My name is Mohit.
Hi, Mohit.
So you mentioned that WhatsApp is very strict when it comes to NLP
Correct.
and chatbots because
Correct.
WhatsApp's objective is to engage conversation
Correct.
between humans.
Correct.
So how do they determine whether the response has been given in a satisfactory manner using
Right.
the NLP? That's
So-
number 1.
Right.
And I had a second question as well.
Sure.
The transactional notifications that are sent through WhatsApp,
Right.
I believe, are much more expensive than SMS. I
Yes.
think it's about 30 paisa, if I'm not wrong. 29 paisa to 30 paisa.
30 to 35%.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
correct. Yeah.
So how does that work profitably for
For a business.
For a business when they can do the same in, let's say, 10 paisa through an SMS? So
Right. So if you don't mind, I'll take your second question first.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's a key challenge that WhatsApp has now woken up to and realized over the last 6 months, where even though WhatsApp provides extremely high engagement rates, now for context, about 98% of WhatsApp messages delivered to an average user in India are read. 90% of these are read in the first 3 minutes. those numbers are extremely skewed and not in favor of SMS as a channel. But being the price conscious market that India is, and certain pockets of Southeast Asia as well, there are customers who would rather prefer the batch and blast approach through an SMS and do it 3 times over instead of probably using WhatsApp as a channel, right? And those are things that WhatsApp is now taking into account and coming up with new templates. Now, just to give you an example, initially, say suppose a travel app is sending you the e-ticket and also a message with that. So those used to be counted as 2 different messages, meaning that you're paying twice over.
Yeah.
In this case, now WhatsApp will be coming up with better templates where these are clubbed together and this becomes one message.
Okay.
In the case of a chatbot, there could be a situation where a user uses multiple emojis. You don't want the brand to be charged for that. So the charging for chatbot works so you can have as many conversations as possible within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Now, beyond that, then it becomes chargeable, right?
Yeah.
So even for chatbot, they are sort of streamlining their guidelines, so to speak, where if it is purely emoji-based conversations, then it is not going to cost the brand all that much. So they are working on that. It's a major challenge that vendors like us plus WhatsApp in general is facing.
Right.
Regarding your first conversation, the NLP bit, all these conversations, so in essence, at the back end, a vendor is able to figure out that a user is not getting the kind of response or support to the query or grievance that he or she may have. So WhatsApp essentially says that 3 or 4 levels of that, if the chatbot is unable to scale to that, then there needs to be an agent handover, is what they call, right? But essentially speaking, as a brand, one would hope that the chatbot continues to become more intelligent based on the conversations that and the scale at which conversations are had. So it's a bit of a gray area, but it's for brands, WhatsApp, and vendors to figure out how this works.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions so far on this? Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
You mentioned that businesses are mostly using WhatsApp
Right.
in the APAC region.
I mentioned that it's becoming increasingly popular in this
Yeah.
region.
Have you studied for other parts of the globe?
So you must remember that the proliferation, the usage of instant messaging apps like Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp is far greater in the emerging markets as compared to the developed economies in the West, right? There you would have, so in a largely Apple-dominated market, such as pockets of the US, where iMessage works more than, say, a WhatsApp, they don't really have that kind of traction there. For these particular markets, where essentially WhatsApp as a peer-to-peer communication channel is essentially free, it's far more prevalent, right? This is why brands are, waking up to the reality that they want to engage